Welcome to the Sound Mind Strategy Podcast with your host, Evan
and Anina Blankenship.
This podcast is aimed to be an in-depth discussion between husband and wife power couple where we take on challenging topics in the mental health and wellness arena.
By trade and training, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, certified professional coactive coach, USA Cycling National Champion, and I love to push my limits both physically and mentally.
As for me, I am currently in a master's program for sport and performance psychology, where I'm also on track to become a certified mental performance consultant. I've also been coaching athletes for the last 5 years, helping them reach their truest potential.
We're both very passionate about athletic performance, mental skills training, spirituality, and we love to take a holistic approach to helping people find harmony in their mind, body, and spirit.
We believe that there's greatness inside of everyone. Our mission and the mission of this podcast is to help you unlock and operate within yours. Hey everybody, welcome back or welcome to the Sound Mind Strategy Podcast. In this week's episode, Anina and I take a deep dive into the subject of fear. We give some quick personal anecdotes on how we've dealt with fear in our own lives, kind of how it manifested, how we've felt like it crept in. We give some great resources as well as tips and tricks on how to deal with and overcome fear. We have by no means perfected it or eradicated it from our lives, but we've made some great strides and share those with you. Some of the resources that we touch on are a couple books. The first one is On Top of Your Game by Carrie Cheadle. The next one is The Fear Project by Jamal Yogis, as well as Dr. Caroline Leaf, just in general. She has a handful of books and podcasts that touches on a lot of neuroscience and brain activity on just different ways to overcome fear and different negative self-talk and things like that. So those are amazing resources. Also, Dr. Michael Gervais gets mentioned in there. He's going to be probably something that gets on repeat. He's just a wealth of knowledge in tons of different facets in that. So I think you're going to really enjoy this podcast. I think we go into a lot of really good information, and it's just fun to get vulnerable and let you know that we're not perfect and we deal with things just like everybody else. So with that, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Good evening, Anina. How are you doing tonight?
Doing really good. I'm especially looking forward to our topic tonight.
Yeah, this is a hard one. We picked one that's got a lot of,
a lot of weight to it.
A lot of substance to it. I guess really before we dive too deep into this right out of the bat, you got anything going on? You got anything that you're kind of planning? You're making a big transition in things, aren't you?
I am. I'm starting to taper down with the cycling a little bit, and been doing some more things with our son, our four-legged son, Cooper. Been trying to really bolster up his endurance for this hiking we're going to be doing this coming week in Asheville, North Carolina. So really looking forward to that. Him and I have been doing some training to get him prepped for the big couple days. There'll be like 5 days in Asheville doing some hiking. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's a new way of, I guess, enjoying nature for me, and enjoying Cooper as well. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So you're hanging up the race wheels and looking at just kind of exploring some other ways to be active, have fun.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So in Asheville, North Carolina, not Nashville, Tennessee, North Carolina, I'll be taking part in the Oat Route event. So I'm actually an ambassador for them, which is really cool. We did the event last year, and they reached out and asked if I would consider it. So I applied and thankfully was accepted. So I'm really, really excited. This is just so fun. It's a 3-day cycling event just through some of the most beautiful and scenic areas that I've ridden in. I know there's probably more in Europe and I haven't been to, but I'm just so pumped for this. Like,
Yeah,
and
you've been
then
training hard for it.
I have, like, but in a really different way. I mean, so low stress, you know. I've been training really hard, but been working. I do coach, but it's really, I feel as a coach and also athlete, I think it's really important to have a coach anyway. You know, like, could I coach myself? Yeah, absolutely. I've done it for other events and endeavors, but I really want to just kind of not have to think about that part of it. I just want to be accountable. I want to just train. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to it. So that's kind of what I got going for me. And then I have some other things in the pipeline that I'm not 100% sure on. We're still talking it through on how I'm thinking about transitioning my racing and training and some other events, style events. I think I've dabbled in one, but we have some other ones on the horizon, and I got a lot of thinking and prepping to do to see kind of the logistics and the realities behind it.
Lots of newness kind of taking place for us.
Yeah, I mean, we're not 20, and yeah, so I mean, we got to think about what inspires us, what challenges us, keeps us moving forward and keeps us interested. You know, like, I do it for fun. I don't do it for a paycheck. So it's got to motivate me and keep me going. So this oat route definitely is that. Like, it's super motivating. It provides challenge without anxiety, I guess, like some stage racing, and provides anxiety, you know, being almost 35 instead of 25. Like, you know, I don't like hurting and getting broken bones and things, which I mean, unfortunately, that is a part of the sport. But anyway, without taking too far of a tangent, we'll rein it back in. But I guess we kind of did touch on some of those things, like anxiety. And so with that, like, you've been injured. I've certainly been injured. Yeah. So with that comes anxiety, and and fear, I think, is a big part of it. So that's the main topic for the discussion today is fear.
Yes. And really, like, how it's, captured us almost in a way in different parts of our lives, and just really how we've worked through it as well, which is pretty incredible when you think about, like, where we've started from and where we've come to now. So, you know, I'm just curious, Evan, would you like to start with us on how, you know, how fear has impacted you, and just starting at like an early age?
Yeah, you know, I had a pretty normal upbringing, but I think some of the things that where my fears originated was, you know, like, we didn't have like a really diverse area where I grew up, or school, you know, so it was just a lot of, you know, white kids, really. That's just how we grew up. And so of the school, I mean, you still have to find and search for diversity within that. So then it becomes more subtle things like socioeconomic status, just stature, height, weight, size, even just color within that. You know, are you really pale or whatever, or hair color? So that really is where I fit in. Like, we weren't from the wealthiest family. I mean, we weren't poor, but we weren't, you know, we didn't have like certain status. I was short, I was small, I had red hair. So whether that meant anything to anyone else or not, like, I had some body issues. I had
impacted you.
Image issues. So I was always fearful and anxious, and for someone to point things out, you know, make fun of me for not looking and being like the other kids. So I was always on edge.
Yeah.
So I kind of developed this way of acting and being where I was the rude kid. I was the short with people. I was almost like an elitist mentality. Like it was weird because I was going to get to them before they could get with me. So I built
it's
this
like a protective mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, I built a wall up. I would never let anyone in, and I would, have my core group of friends where, we would be the ones to pick on and ostracize rather than before they got to us.
Right.
I think that's I don't think I was an actual bully, but I mean, I just was rude and
you were fearful that they were going to find something about you,
Yeah.
so you had to hurry up and try to find something about them.
Beat them to the punch, really.
Right.
Really it was. I remember I ran track in junior high, and I remember we toured around, to a local track meet, and this was probably one of the scariest events for me. Like I got isolated from the kids from my school with this other group from a different school, and like they started just like surrounded me, and I literally was fearful that it was going to become physical. There was 5 of them against me, all bigger, inner city kids, just, they take your hat, then they start pushing you, and then, start calling you names. And so like, it really was a scary event for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't have, I know people have gone through so much worse, but in my life, this was something that impacted me. Yeah. So just moving forward in that, like, I kind of kept that mentality everywhere I went. Like, I didn't try really hard in school because, it was that fear of failure or fear of success. So if I didn't try, if I didn't put myself forward, and, then they couldn't say I was a failure at it because I didn't try.
Exactly.
Like, you got such and such grade. Well, it doesn't matter because I didn't even try. I don't even care. So you can't call me a failure. So that just kind of snowballed, and then, no college, and then the same kind of thing. I always found a way out through athletics or some kind of like, physical output, like I was, and then it kind of just snowballed from that because I was never the best. I would always excel really fast and get a lot of forward progression in sport until I was like, oh wait, these are the really good ones, and I'm just not there. So then that goes into present day athletics, racing bikes. I've been doing this for 10 plus years, and same thing. I moved through the ranks pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Not the fastest ever, but pretty quickly, until I found like other really good riders. And then I was just I always felt like I was one step behind, So I found myself really trying to like push the envelope really hard, and like, I got to prove myself. So I would not be present in the race because I was in such a hurry to move beyond the level or category, whatever I was in, that I wouldn't even be present to race the race that I needed to do well. So I was in such a rush that I actually just caused myself sometimes injury. I would put myself in bad situations, just like I got to prove myself, or bad results. So that's really how fear kind of did it. So then as injuries rack up, and then the getting hit by a car. So now I have injuries and age piling on. It's just, and I have this perpetual thought process going on of like putting yourself in there again, or I'm just going to get hurt again.
Was that kind of like your negative thought loop then? It just kind of kept kind of like a running record in your head a lot of times? What was it? Like, what were you saying a lot of times?
I would just see myself like washing out in a corner and going down, or some weird thing, the guy in front of me would crash and I would have no way out and I'd smash into him, I always found myself like just actually seeing myself get injured again because I had hit the pavement more than my fair share of times. I think every racer, if you spend any time racing bikes long enough, it's kind of just one of the things that happens. But I think I found myself on the ground more than I should have.
Yeah. And how was that like impacting your racing, would you say?
Oh, horribly. I couldn't race well at all. Like I just, wasn't in the right frame of mind. I was always anticipating something bad and being anxious, and heart rate through the roof from anxiety, not necessarily through racing.
Right.
My mind was going a million miles an hour. I wasn't being present of what I was actually doing.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you were seeing things like very visually of this is going to happen, that's going to happen. But what exactly were like the thoughts? Can you recall what the thoughts were that you were telling yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's just real similar to that. Like, I mean, those thoughts were
You're going to get hurt.
going to get hurt, like, or a sequence, like playing it like a movie, watching myself go down, or someone else go down and me not have a way out. Or the other thing would be just not performing well. Oh, we're going to get to this key feature of the race, whether it's a climb or a sprint finish or being able to make a certain move, and just not having the ability to do it. So that was the other part of it too, just fear of failure, of
Right.
inadequacy.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was going to be found out that I'm really not that good. Like, why do you coach people? Like, you're really not that good. So it really weighed on me from many angles. I was always fearful of what other people thought about me. I was fearful of injury. I was fearful of just a lot of things, and self-sabotage in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and we see how this starts at like such an early age too, like from your youth, how you notice how it played a role, and then how it just continues to just perpetuate the more and more, just evidence you collect along the way that really bolsters up why this fear is valid, right?
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. What about you? Like, have you dealt with fear in a personal way?
Geesh. Yeah, I really have. I realized that it started at a very young age as well. Like you mentioned, happened for you. And I think it's probably happened for all of us at a young age. And sometimes we're just not aware of it. But I do remember even being like as a young child, just always fearful that I was going to get hurt or something bad was going to happen to me. And I think a lot of things like, you and I've talked a lot about just how we're brought up sometimes. And it's no fault of my parents at all. It's just they had deep-rooted fears. And those fears kind of attach themselves to me in a way.
Right.
So,
I don't mean to cut you off there, but like they had what were their deep-rooted fears, if you don't mind? I mean, if you don't mind
it was
sharing.
more like, so for my dad, it was like he was always terrified of roller coasters. So I remember being a little kid and everyone would be on the roller coasters and my dad wouldn't be. So he was scared of them. So then I was scared of them. So I kind of took on that fear, so to speak. If he was scared, then I needed to be scared too. I mean, my brother and sisters, my mom still had a ball on the roller coasters, but I was like, there's obviously a reason I need to be scared of this. So I was for many, many years.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then my mom, for example, she got stuck in an elevator at one point, and so she was fearful of elevators. So I remember anytime, it always seemed like we'd stay at a hotel and be on like the 20th floor. So we'd hike up the stairs with my mom. And so it's, at the time.
You guys would go with her so she wouldn't be alone?
Yeah, we'd go with her so she wouldn't be alone.
She wasn't afraid to walk the stairs. You guys were just doing it out of
this kind of support and love for her. Yeah.
I see.
And it's kind of interesting when you think about it, like how did that actually have an impact on me? But because it was so present in our lives, in just different ways. I mean, that's just two examples. I know there's other examples too, but it just slowly starts to just kind of trickle into your life. And so I just found myself being scared of things, just as a young kid. All my friends were out rollerblading and I was always nervous. So I'd be, poking around the back like...
like there was very similarly, like I do remember seeing fear of other things in my family as well. Like there was just this fear of money, like not having enough money, or there was always this thing of like, there was always this kind of fear that hovered over finances. But it's interesting when you and I met, and then obviously meeting your parents, and I love your parents. They're great. But I do remember that stuck out to me a lot. Like every time we would leave, be careful, be careful, be careful. I mean, it wasn't just like,
sincere,
I love you, see you later.
was...
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't joking, but it was just like, to me as an outsider, that really was like, that's odd. Like, why are they saying be careful with such emphasis? Like, we're just getting in the car and going home. Like, we haven't been drinking. It's not icy out. It's a beautiful evening. We're just heading home. Like, it stuck out to me. But where for you, it was probably just normal.
It was normal. Yeah, I didn't really think anything of it. But now when it's kind of like, in retrospect, it's like, whoa, now I can kind of see how the little seeds that were planted, really they took root and really started to grow. Yeah.
So do you feel like with that, like the be careful, be careful, be carefuls, was it like, is there something I should be taking care of or being more thoughtful of? Like, is there something I should be nervous about?
Yeah, now when I look back and just the way I've acted as an adult and behaved in certain situations, it does make me realize that I think that did play a role in it, because it was kind of just always operating from this be careful, don't get hurt, just being very watchful and always kind of on guard, and just really scared of anything to happen. So like, I don't want to get hurt, so I'm not going to do this or I'm not going to do that. So I really put myself in this little box and didn't let myself really live much for a long time.
I think we both described our personal experiences with fear and how they manifested with us, and kind of just like nothing traumatic in either scenario. Neither one of us had any traumatic event, but you just saw through just normal, loving, kind parents how fear was just kind of like brought in. And so like, since we've been married and we've been together and dated for a long time, and since our experiences with fear are kind of vastly different, could you see those and point, or like, were you able to witness those in me?
Not really. Like, I always felt like you were very fearless, and like, I was like, dang, I got to catch up with him. Why does he not seem to have any of this fear? So it didn't seem like it was as prevalent for you. And I think a lot of times I rationalize it in my brain that, guys just aren't, they're not fearful. They just must just not have any fear in them, because I just felt like I never really saw it in a lot of men, I guess. Like I did give the example of my dad always being really scared of roller coasters, and actually really scared of heights. Just in general, like looking out a window from a hotel, like he couldn't even get close to the ledge. But yeah, I kind of just put the majority of guys besides my dad, in this box that like they're not fearful of anything. It just must be, a lucky trait guys have, which I know is not true, but I kind of rationalized it like that. Like, it's okay, Nina, for you to be fearful because you're a girl, basically. Like, when I look back, that's what I was doing to myself, which now I'm like, that is so ridiculous, but it gave me a way out. Like, you can be scared because you're a girl, but he's not scared. Evan's not scared because he's a guy, and guys just don't get scared.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I always found myself of like, and I guess, obviously I know myself in that regard better than I would expect you to, because just like I masked it to everyone else,
right?
I probably did that with you subconsciously, most likely. I mean, I wasn't trying to hide any fear from you, but honestly, I probably didn't know. True. For a long time. It really wasn't until like you and I started exploring this and becoming more trained and learned in this stuff that I was really able to analyze and do some self-awareness, and through some mindfulness practice and just reading and diving deep into these topics, that I was like, wow, I'm harboring a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, that's where that comes from. But I do remember there was some things about you that just stuck out to me. Like, it wasn't anything that you were like extra afraid of, But what stuck out was just, I think, the unwillingness to move past things. Like, that's normal that someone would be nervous or timid about that the first time. But just how long you would hold on to it, it was just like, now that's different. So that's the only thing. So just in that whole loop there, like, that's really the only thing that stuck out to me about you. And now what we are learning were your fears. It's just that you had an unwillingness to let things go.
I did. And I know, like, from different, brain work I've done and read, like Dr. Caroline Leaf, a Christian neuroscientist, I've just, oh my gosh, I've read so much stuff from her, but talks really about how, like, it is this negative thought loop that gets so ingrained in your brain that it's like getting yourself out of it is like getting your wheel out of a rut. It's scary because you don't know if you're going to fall, get hurt. It's the I can't compare it to, I can wear the comfy pair of jeans that feel really good all the time and, don't require much from me. I just put them on and it's like, everything's great because it's familiar. Or it's that, like, having to put them skinny jeans on where it's like, I can see every little wrinkle and
it's some real work to get into them.
Exactly. And there's a vulnerability that comes with it too of being seen and, what could possibly come from that. So that's where that fear comes again. And I can even think, about like talking about it in my childhood, but then even thinking like, when I went to college and did different things, it was kind of like a fear of what will people really think of me if they know me? And if they know me, they're not going to value me or love me. And so that was a huge thing I had to work through. And and now when I look back, it's like crazy to think about, like, different things I got into, different drugs and things of that nature, because I was scared that if people really knew me, like I said, they wouldn't like me. So I masked it with doing different drugs throughout my life and thought that was the answer because now people will like me because this drug does this to me.
I do remember in our first few years of marriage and it came out as, it wasn't just like a normal rocky patch of things. Like, we went through our, we're no miracle couple, but I mean, we've gone through our things, but I think overall we're definitely we've had a great marriage, but those first few years, when we learn about each other and test the waters and grow and develop and, like, make compromises and make changes and develop, like, it really came to the surface that you had a fear of me leaving you. Like, and it was pretty unfounded. I mean, there was really no real reason that you would think that. I think it's just, you just thought that's just what was going to happen. There was nothing that you could do to stop it. It was inevitable.
This is my fate. It happened in my family, multiple times. And so I just thought, okay, this is your fate, Anina. This is what's going to happen to you. So you might as well just like buckle down and brace for the worst.
Right.
And man, that's such a crummy way to live.
And it was really heavy weight on our marriage, because I felt like I had to prove myself to you on a continual loop of like, I love you. I'm not leaving. There's no one else. There's nothing else. Like, and it wasn't you believing me. Mm-hmm. That was not going to be what changed it. Is you had to rewrite
the script. Yes. Yeah. I did. And those thoughts that I told myself for so long, again, were so ingrained in my brain that it's like I had to start really showing myself love and showing that I was worthy, and that fear had no spot.
You wouldn't accept my love if you, couldn't love yourself and didn't think that you were even worthy of love. So if I'm saying I love you, it's just like, well, you're a liar.
Yeah.
I'm not worthy of love, so you're lying because, so that's just how twisted our own thought patterns can get. Like, for someone, they can't even prove themselves because I'm blocking that because I'm not worthy of it. And I've already told myself I'm not worthy of love. So if you're saying you love me, you're lying to me.
Exactly. And it's like what Joyce Meyer says so well, and I love it, fears, false evidence appearing real.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that is so true. Once I heard that, it was like mind blown.
Yeah. It's such simple little phrase.
Yeah.
But it just carries a lot of weight. And I wanted to touch on something too. You talked about Dr. Caroline Leaf, and very similar to that. Like, there's another book. It's called The Fear Project by Jamal Yogas, and he talks about some science and some actual research articles that have been done on fear.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one, they use rats in a lot of their studies, but it just kind of showed like they would feed the rats, and then they would shock rats, and there was different ways on these being able to kind of test these rats, like,
Okay.
So they would stimulate and they would show them something and then shock. So then every time they would see this color, then they would associate it with fear. So they would be able to test brainwave. They would test different things. So like when they would see this, like everything would elevate in anticipation of the shock. So it was very fear-based, right?
Yeah.
And then so they were able to say that, like, and kind of loop that through some other science and relate it back to humans and stuff like that, of like, we rewrite our memories every scenario.
Right.
So like, even though they're not getting the shock, or even though we're not getting the same thing that happened, like just our body going through the physiological changes in anticipation of that traumatic event, we're ready for it. So that's the thing that we're recalling is the most recent one. We're not even recalling the very first thing that happened, but we've replayed that so many times, and it's like our brains are supercomputers.
Right.
And when they open the filing drawer on how should I respond to X stimuli, fear response, anxiety, anticipation of injury or divorce or whatever the thing is, like we've rewritten that, and that the path to that has gotten so broad, it's just automatic response.
It's automatic.
So, and the other thing that they touch on was such a cool thing to think of. Like, we've all heard of fight or flight, we have that the sympathetic, response is fight or flight, but it's also fight or freeze is also another part of that. And they said fear is freezing. So what fear does is freeze you. And the best way to break out of that, just to get your mind to start ticking over again, and the ability to create new pathways and create new memories and create new ideas around that on how you want to structure it, is movement. Just move the body in any way. Obviously, there's some things that create a greater sense of confidence and just that positive self-image.
Right.
So getting
those power
big,
poses.
Poses, exactly. Just getting big and getting powerful and feeling good and thinking good.
Like Amy Covey's, and she talks about, like, she has that TED Talk where she talks about like the power poses, and like, how animals do it too, but how we can do it. Like if we really, get ourselves
like
big.
Stand up like a big bear when
exactly,
they're
yeah.
No, and it's so, it's kind of silly, but it's just so true. It's like when you feel nervous, when you feel like you don't want to do something, or you feel like you're going to make a mistake, or everyone's looking at you in a negative light, like what do? You get small, you shrink up, you roll your shoulders down. But when you're feeling confident, like I'm going to go nail this conference or this talk, or I'm going to perform really well in sport, what do? You get big, your arms are loose, you're not pulling them in, your head's up high, your chest is out.
Yeah, you carry yourself in a whole nother way. Like I'm the athlete to be.
Yeah. Exactly. So just kind of moving into that, like, what are some of the tips and tricks that you have implemented? What are some of the things that you've learned and overcome?
Oh, man. Well, I'm still a work in progress. I will say that. But, just from doing my own research on the brain and just really figuring out, because it was just so intriguing to me of how, like, why do I keep telling myself I want to do this differently? I'm going to do it differently. But every time I get to the obstacle or whatever I'm going to do, it's like I just go back into auto mode. And so it was so super frustrating to me. But I have learned that it's like I have to be very intentional in my thoughts of what I'm saying to myself, for one, but also doing those mental visualizations, having to really visualize myself being successful at something. And so there's some times that I will try to take during the week to visualize myself, whether I'm going to give a presentation or I'm doing something new on the bike. I will have to visualize myself doing it the way that I want it to happen. Now I will say that it's not always worked. It's not always been easy. But once I realized that it's like this negative loop pattern that I have got to cut because I want a new healthy branch, so to speak, to be growing in my brain, right. And once I think I realized I had the power to do it, I just wasn't the victim here, and woe is me, I'm just going to have to keep doing this, then it changed the way I saw things. But with that being said, I do want to be completely honest that, there is still things I have to work through. And for instance, if there's anyone in St. Louis knows about, there's this bridge that if anybody ever wants to go do it with me, I would love it, because in my brain, I've really struggled with it. I have preconditioned myself that there are these turns on this bridge that I'm just not able to make without unclipping my shoe. And it drives me nuts. And I have visualized and I have talked to myself how to do it. But it's like every time I go, it's like I don't have to think, and I just automatically go
before you think, you've already unclipped.
Exactly. And totally what happens is like all of a sudden my heart rate gets really fast. I start to get kind of blurry in how I see things. And so it's like my body reacting to what it thinks is going to happen. And I just go back into the same mode I've always done. So I definitely do not have this licked quite yet, but I do know that I need to put more time into it. And I know in the grand scheme of things, it's like not that big of a deal, but in the same respect, it is too.
But it is a big deal.
It is.
Just like
it still bugs the crap out of me.
I mean, Michael Gervais, I talk about him all the time, sports psychologist. His view is there's no such thing as a big moment. So whether it's early season scrimmage, I mean, he works with a professional football team, or they're in the Super Bowl. Every moment's the same moment, right? Mm-hmm. So just taking that same train of thought into this, like it's a Super Bowl moment, like, or it's the next moment. Every moment carries the same amount of weight. So you should be able to prepare mentally for that moment in the same way.
Right. Yeah. And that one has been the hardest for me. But I will say that I do want to work on it. So if there's anybody out there that wants to come work on it with me, because there's strength in numbers.
I see a flood of messages
that
coming
would be
in.
Awesome.
Hey, Anina, how you doing on the bridge?
Well, I know, because, it makes me think about when I used to do more cyclocross. There was this stupid tree limb that just scared the crud out of me. And I was working. I know. I'm like, come on, just get your front tire over, your back one, easy, right? And I watched the guys do it a million times. And what I ended up doing was employing some friends to go out with me. And we practice and practice and practice it. And I don't even think about it.
She got it. It wasn't the prettiest thing. It wasn't a lot of finesse involved, but she did it.
I was barreling myself into it.
I give it to her because she did it.
But it took a lot of intentionality. Like I had to think through my thoughts of what is the worst thing that's going to happen, Anina? Like, what are you really scared of? And just really breaking it down.
Yeah.
And then going out there with friends like made such a big difference. And so that was a huge moment for me. Like it felt so good. But so anyways, I just share that of just knowing that when I really did take the time and put the work in to making a difference, it really happened. And the change happened. And I will say, like talking in front of people has always scared me. And what I keep doing is that I tell myself to feel the fear and do it anyways. And so, when I start to get those heart palpitations and things happening, it's like I tell myself, Anina, you can either think like, this is scary, I'm going to die, something bad's going to happen, or you can think, no, those feelings that you're feeling within your body are just your body's way of letting you know it's excited for this new thing that's to come.
Yeah.
And so, really just like, retraining my brain to think about it that way has like immensely changed just my ability to like, talk to random people, to do presentations now that I've done at work and with my business. So it was definitely a game changer. So I think once you're aware of it, but then also not fighting it. Because I think what would happen too is that I would get really upset with myself. Like, Anina, you've worked on this. Why are you scared again?
Yeah, I do, or I've been alongside of you a lot when you would have those fits of anger or depressions, or you just get so hard on yourself, so down on yourself about like, why can't I get that? And it was just, I think that's the big component that a lot of people miss, is just like, how long have you been doing it this way? Now, because we're wanting to change and you didn't get it, trial number 2 or 3, like, cut yourself some slack. Like, it's going to take some time. Caroline Leaf she's huge on this. She talks about creating new habit, which is also from the neuroscience point of how long it takes to create new pathways. And it's 3 cycles of 21 days. So
exactly.
I mean, that's 63 days of continuous, real, purposeful effort. It's not just like whimsical or like hit it a couple times within those 63 days. It's like, no, you better do it. And you create that because you have to, one, deaden the pathway that you don't want, and then you have to literally build a new bridge.
You do.
So, I mean, give yourself time, and that's self-care, that's self-love and compassion. And
just being okay with noticing it, right? Like, I'm noticing this is happening right now, and just being okay with it.
Well, that's self-awareness. I mean, there, it's just like having a whole different idea on what to expect. So, one, have a plan of action before you go into it.
Right.
And understand your arousal state. Like, am I way too anxious? Am I way too nervous? Am I too amped to perform task optimally, whether it's speaking in front of people or athletics or anything? Or am I too low? Like, am I too flatlined where, you could be self-sabotaging, like, well, I'm just not even going to try. I'm going to be lethargic and flatline. Right. So you have to know how to either elevate or decrease. Now, generally speaking, in the anxiety fear department, we're going to be way too jacked.
Yes.
We're going to be way too amped up. So we have to learn how to actually bring down our physiological state. We have to decrease heart rate,
do some mindful breathing,
do some breathing, do some meditation, do some imagery, literally see yourself do it. Like, has there been a time where you perform this optimally or the way that you want to perform it? Watch yourself do it over and over and over and make that the normal.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying too is that sometimes in our brain, we have to remind our brain, hey, I've done something like this before. Let's not be so timid or fearful of it. Just different things in our life. Sometimes we need to pull out that file drawer. I'm like, we've done something like this, brain. Let's do it.
Yeah.
To not have so much
David
resistance.
Goggins calls it like his cookie jar. Like,
yes.
Now, granted, he uses like other big hard events and can, like his time in the Navy SEALs, having to go through Hell Week 3 times,
right,
or having broken his feet running ultra marathons. Like, he might not just say, okay, I've done Hell Week 3 times, I can do it a 4th. It's like to say, I've done something so demanding, I can do this.
Yes.
If this, then that, and it's really cool. I just to kind of speed things along and not keep this on too long, I kind of wanted to touch on another big resource and kind of like some tips and tricks that I've employed.
Yeah.
So it's called On Top of Your Game by Carrie Cheadle, and she's a mental skills coach, and the book, like I said, it was On Top of Your Game. It's amazing to me.
It is.
And she
so
kind of
good.
touches on a lot of things that you talk about. So 2 people coming into the same challenge and their interpretation of the situation. Now, that's how they respond. So they could see the exact same challenge, but one could see it as challenge and be excited. The other could see it as an issue and an obstacle and be anxious, nervous, fearful.
It's your perspective, right?
It's all down to perspective. So that's a big part of it. And then she does kind of talk about anxiety and fear a little bit different. And I don't want to get caught up in the semantics of like the actual definition. I think most people call fear kind of how we've been talking about it. But she says anxiety is worry and fear is real. So anxiety is an emotion that we've taught that there's a possible threat. So, but like fear, anxiety is also designed to get us to act. So one is like created in our mind, like to have anxiety. So that's like looming fear, right?
Right.
So I think I don't want to get caught up in exactly all that, but just I think that's a huge resource on how we can like one, be aware of what makes us anxious, what makes us nervous and fearful, and then ways to come about it. So I think a lot of that is to be able to work with a professional who understands this kind of stuff, or even just going through these great resources that we've mentioned. Like, I mean, this book will help you a ton. Dr. Caroline Leafs has several books and
Who Switched Off My
podcasts,
Brain
and
by her.
she's got tons of great content. The Fear Project, like I mentioned, just a lot of those, just becoming more aware and then being able to do that inner work can really help, you analyze what your triggers are, teach you different methods on how to decrease anxiety, and then also coming alongside someone who can help you tackle those things, like give you the right the right thought process on how to go into it. And like, if something scares you, maybe you should move towards it. That's great, but like, how?
What does that look like? Right.
So they give you the tools to do that. So working with a professional or working with someone who's into that, like, I would highly recommend going through some of these resources, getting in contact with Anina or myself, and just going through that. There's nothing wrong with seeking help. Just like you have listened, like, we didn't have the big traumatic event, but like fear still came through.
Right.
And it kept us from doing things optimally. Like, whether or not we were pursuing professional career, whether or not we're doing whatever, like, it was something that, it was just a wonderful outlet that we loved and we became passionate about, but we couldn't do it to the level we wanted because we had developed fear.
Right. Well, and I'm curious, like, just real quick, what would you say is like your top tip for people struggling with fear? Like something that you've used that has been really impactful for you? Or just like a culmination of everything?
Yeah, well, there's a few different things. Like, I don't think any one thing really helped. I would just say, first off, you have to be aware. You have to be aware of your triggers and the leading up into it. Like bike races, like just my personality type. Like even in the early stages, like anxiety would set in a couple days out. So just knowing that, right? Like, did I have all the stuff? Do I have, we better leave an hour early, just little things like that's just my personality. I wasn't necessarily fearful, but I was anxious. So bringing anxiety into an event, you don't perform well. And then things happen and then fear happens, right? So it's just like this perpetual cycle. So self-awareness, 1. 2, learning how to and find that optimal performance level, whether it's for speaking or performing athletically. So, and how to get there. How do you get to your optimal level? Sometimes you need to isolate yourself away from people because other people increase that level, that arousal level. So different tricks for that. 1, to use isolation to kind of just like, hey, I'll catch up with you guys in a minute. Just need to go over something. So I use like diaphragmatic breathing and some big belly breaths. That helps get more oxygen in, calm it down. Music is another good one. You have to find the right tempo. You have to find the right, I found a short playlist, great lyrics, the right tempo for me. It wasn't too amped up. It would bring me down a little bit. Imagery, to be able to see myself perform optimally. In those situations when it was like leading up to the event, simple checklist. Write down what I needed. do things early. Like that really helped out a lot. There were some other things that I would use, like just different calming things. So just body scans and
like how am I, like, do I feel any
how do
tension?
So just,
Yeah.
Some muscle relaxation techniques, releasing tension that you just like, when you do those little body scans, you're like, oh, I didn't realize I was tight there.
Right.
And you could do a little flex and do a little and release that tension. And then through, mentally, you just kind of you actually want to see that tension releasing and leaving the body. So
it's a lot of intentionality here, like having to be very
Yeah.
intentional.
And I think the biggest thing, like, I love to explore and I love to learn and I love to do these kind of things on my own. But even beyond that was working with a professional, working with Coach Paul from Lindenwood, Dr. Paul Wright, and just going through some of those visualizations and learning how to do that, and then also developing my own meditation routine, like with just simple apps that we've touched on before in other podcasts. But like all that together, like I learned how to show up at an optimal level to perform. I didn't want to show up way too flatlined and just lethargic, but I didn't want to be way too amped up either. I just learned that. Like, so for me personally, I had to cut down my warm-ups because that got me to thinking about it. My warm-ups are super chill now.
And I think the important part of this too is just to realize what works for you, and to try different things out, and what works for you may not work for somebody else, but to also not get overwhelmed by the process because we didn't start out doing every single step like this. It was a slow progression.
Absolutely. It was very slow progression, and it was a trial by fire, trial and error kind of thing, like add this, get rid of that this works. That was like, So,
exactly. So it's just being open to all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I don't want to go on way too long, but I really think we hit on some excellent points. I think we kind of just hit on some good resources and are absolutely open and would love to give some more help and advice if that were to come up.
Yeah, please reach out if you would like it.
And just moving forward, just to kind of do a little housekeeping stuff. I have got some questions through people have contacted through Instagram and some other social media forms. So thank you. And I really appreciate that. I do have your questions, and we are going to do kind of think about how we're going to go forward into maybe a little short Q&A at the end, or maybe answer one or two questions at the end.
Yeah, that'd be good.
If we get enough, we might do like an extra
Q&A session a
month or something like that, where we can just really dive in and answer all the questions. I think that would be kind of fun. So I guess just to wrap things up, just some resources that we touched on was On Top of Your Game by Carrie Cheadle, The Fear Project by Jamal Yogis,
and also Dr. Caroline Leaf, Who Switched Off My Brain.
And Dr. Caroline Leaf also has a podcast, and Carrie Cheadle has a podcast as well. So a lot of good information there. We'd love to keep your ears here, but we also really want to make sure you're learning from a lot of cool people.
Yeah.
I mentioned Dr. Michael Gervais. He's got a great podcast as well. Ton of good resources there. So thank you so much. We really hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please share the podcast with your friends. Subscribe if you're not already through however you found it. Please subscribe there. Rate and review. That helps us out a ton to get found by people looking for different shows that are in whatever vein they're looking for. So that helps out a ton.
Yeah, and thank you for letting us share today. I think it's just it's a journey we've been on and want to continue, to go on, of just learning about ourselves and ways we can help other people as well. And this really is our heart's desire to do this. So we just, even pray that if this is something that, touched you and was impactful for you to just be able to absorb that information and then share it with others too, that you think it could really benefit too. So thank you guys again so much.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. That was a really fun episode to record. Anina and I had a fun time in this conversation. Just to wrap things up, you can find us on social media at Sound Mind Strategies on Instagram and Facebook, as well as our personal accounts, Evan Blankenship, Anina Blankenship at Facebook. And then on Instagram, Anina is at Anina_Renee. And you can find me at Evan_Blankenship on Instagram. Again, thanks everybody. Share the episode, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.